Greetings, Michael King here again from the Cosmosis Mentoring Centre, and today I'd like to chat with you about psychics, clairvoyants and seers and what the differences are. The word psychic is from the Greek word psychisos and literally means of the mind or of the mental. A psychic is a person who professes an ability to perceive information hidden from the normal senses through extrasensory perception, or ESP. Given that the psychic uses their lower conscious mind as a reflector to mirror the thoughts and desires of people, this is the lowest form of extrasensory perception. It is true that earthbound spirits are still in possession of both their desire aspects of their emotional bodies and their mental bodies, so a true psychic is indeed able to register impressions from earthbound souls and relay those impressions to those that are still left behind here alive. But, and this is the big but, there are very, very few true psychics. True psychics do not need to fish. Fishing is also known as cold reading. Cold reading is a procedure by which the client or audience is persuaded of a performer's apparent psychic ability through the revealing of their personality and problems. On one level, the effectiveness of cold reading can be accomplished by delivering a prepared script. This script uses high probability statements disguised to appear as though it is obtained through some extraordinary means. Additionally, the use of vagueness and ambiguity within a reading ensures the willing cooperation of the client in its interpretation. The key element to cold reading, however, is providing information through cues given by the subjects themselves. Think of a cold reader as a Sherlock Holmes type character using inductive and deductive reasoning and observing the clothing, physical features, body language and reactions of the subject. The information provided by such observations is then fed back to the subject. The dramatic way which the information is delivered helps to convince the listener of its apparent accuracy. Fishing is a vital part of this deception, being the major element of getting information from a subject that, on a very simplistic level, really entails pure interrogation. Another major component in a good cold reading, however, consists of feeding back information to the client, usually in a different form. So there are more subtle ruses to accomplishing the illusion of psychic ability than merely direct questioning. For example, a psychic may say, "I see the letter J." The subject may indicate some reaction, a body or verbal cue, in which case the psychic will say, "Joe, Jane, something that starts with J," at which point the client may say, "Oh, it must be Uncle Jack." If the subject has no reaction to the letter J, then the supposed psychic passes it off by saying that they must have picked it up from someone else. Cold reading, therefore, relies heavily on cues given by the listener, and it's not genuine psychic phenomena. I say this again, that no true psychic needs to fish. A true psychic is able to provide information about the future and even the past that the client may not be aware of. They don't need to fish. The client does not need to provide cues. In addition, there are circumstances where the true psychic does not have to even access the client, like with remote psychic readings. It is in these situations where a psychic is able to use their genuine psychic ability, if they are in fact a genuine psychic. Having said that, this is still the lowest form of mediumship, and it only involves reflecting back what is going on in the desire life of the subject. Personally, I shudder at the lack of spiritual attainment and the level of egoic fear-based corruption present in most people who call themselves psychic readers. If the psychic is well educated, then they are able to interpret the reflection and speculate as to what outcomes the subject's thoughts and desires are likely to produce in the future with some accuracy. And if they have some psychological or analytical insight into the human condition, they may also be able to offer advice as to what the subject needs to do in order to change their likely future. But let's face it, that's what any good counsellor or psychotherapist does. Psychics often use tools such as cards or runes to reflect their intuition and act as a bridge and means of translation between their perception and the subject. Although psychic phenomenon is rudimentary, it does certainly provide a valuable service for these two reasons. For many, it provides proof that the spirit lives on after death, and two, a good psychic is able to serve in a counselling capacity and teacher to those young souls beginning to explore the spiritual path. The downside of this phenomenon is that so often it creates dependency in the subject and so prevents any real spiritual or personal growth. Now the second level, the next highest level, clairvoyants. They offer the next higher level of mediumship. Clairvoyants are able to peer up into the higher planes and dimensions, which are causal in nature, where we are at being the realm of effects, to peer up and to receive impressions from those higher causal levels. They require no tools to interpret and translate their perceptions to the subject, as their mind does this semi-automatically. At the lower levels of proficiency, their perception is reflected in the mind's eye or the mind's mirror, which is probably a more accurate term, and it's reflected as pictures, scenes, symbols and sounds, which then need to be translated though through the conscious mind, and that's often where the problem is, the translation. A properly trained clairvoyant is able to use their subconscious mind to interpret this information and translate it into words, imagery and feelings without consciously engaging with it, and this prevents the medium's likes and dislikes from distorting the information. Such is the beginning of real-time channeling. In truth, the word clairvoyant refers to the mediums that interpret their perceptions from the causal realms as images. Clairsentients interpret these energy streams as feelings, and clairaudience interpret these reflections as sound. The way the mediumship works depends upon the perception orientation of that individual person, that individual medium. Some people are naturally kinesthetic and they become clairsentients. The more visual become clairvoyant, and the more auditory become clairaudient. Only a very tiny percentage of mediums ever receive any formal training. Training requires doing an apprenticeship with a trained and hopefully a master medium who has been initiated into the unbroken oral tradition of mediumship which has been handed down from antiquity. Given that the Roman Church murdered almost 8 million mediums, healers and midwives over an 800-year period in an effort to eliminate the competition, the oral tradition of mediumship initiation is getting pretty hard to find here on our beloved little planet. A master medium is what is known as a seer. And a seer is one who has not only done such an apprenticeship, but also has attained to a degree of psychological clarity and mental illumination in their own right, which allows them to work in tandem with beings and intelligences residing upon higher planes of consciousness, and in effect relay and translate back and forth between these higher beings and the subject or group. Such beings and intelligences on higher planes are the various strata of deity and verity which architect, govern and oversee the evolutionary process in the form worlds. It's also very common for beings who have transcended the need for physical embodiment and now exist upon these higher planes of consciousness to seek to work with well-trained souls of differing degrees here on the earth for a variety of reasons. One reason is that it allows them from higher levels to hone their skills in reaching downward on the evolutionary spiral and communicating. So it's their mediumship working down. Another reason is that once they reach the clarity of these higher planes, they often realise that they wish they had known some of what they now know when they were on the levels that we're now on. So they seek out enlightened souls that are on these levels a few steps behind them and offer to teach them and channel through them. Given that many such beings now are working directly within the ordering of the evolutionary processes on these lower levels, it also gives them the opportunity to keep an eye on what is happening here. The criteria for gaining the attention of these high-level beings is stringent and far beyond the level of attainment of the average, even sincere seeker of truth on the spiritual path. Most people think Saint Germain is their personal friend and guide, but the reality is that beings like this have a lot of work to do, and they have a lot more to do than just talk to people. So it requires discipline, commitment, and an extreme amount of purity of intention and psychological clarity to gain this. So these beings will never give orders, they just provide encouragement and support and assist in your realisation process. They will never impose their will upon you, nor will they ever interfere in your life. Of course, there are a lot of low-level mischief makers floating around out there who find it hilarious how gullible so many people are here. Anything that communicates with you and tells you how great you are, or that you are chosen in some way and generally feeds your ego, is definitely not a high-level spiritual being. I'm astounded at how many low-level mediums there are that are being possessed to some degree or other by some low-level entity claiming to be the greatest this or that. Opening yourself up psychically without the proper training and correct spiritual hygiene and self-defense, psychic self-defense that is the height of folly, and you do so at your own peril. Hearing voices, of course, may be an indicator of some psychological disorder, and many so-called mediums are just disturbed individuals who are channeling their own sub-personalities rather than some high-level being. The highest levels of seership involve advanced processes such as cosmic telepathy, prophecy, and serving as a voice channel or mouthpiece for great memory composites on the universal and cosmic levels of existence. Seers are able to polarise their awareness in the higher causal planes of superconsciousness and filter that knowing down into their brain consciousness and then relay that through thought, feeling and the spoken word. That's what channeling is, turning energy into human communication. Seers work through the higher correspondences of clairvoyance, clairaudience and clairsentience, which are intuition, inspiration and illumination. Now, our historical records contain large numbers of references to enlightened souls serving in this capacity of prophets and teachers in tandem with higher evolutionary intelligences. It's less common now, only because few are willing to undergo the training and meet the criteria which is required. A few want to keep this understanding secret so as to maintain their little spiritual empires and their places at the top of their own little hierarchies, but I feel strongly that this training should be made available purely on a merit basis to all who are willing and able. Anyway, here at the Cosmosis Mentoring Centre, we offer this ancient training in seership in many degrees. It's usually a 5 to 7 year apprenticeship training, during which time you will be mentored towards becoming the clearest medium you can possibly be. You know, in ancient Egypt, this training was 21 years, as was the training to become a school teacher. This extensive training was because they knew that the future health of our society depended on only the very wisest souls teaching the young. We will help you to discover and create your chosen learning and spiritual work in this lifetime. This is no 3-weekend bullshit training where you play games and then get a certificate saying you are a very special high-level master. This is serious training for only the most sincere of aspirants. This is a career path, and you can blend the seership training with either a formal qualification as a mentor and coach, a naturopath, or as a social entrepreneur if you so choose. These are government accredited recognised qualifications. Visit the website for more information. Thanks for listening and keep on loving.